I woke to the steady beat of rain on the roof. The grey North Carolina sky stretched over Canopolis like a soaked blanket, blurring the fall colors into muted smudges. November had settled in damp, cold, and unwelcoming. My name is Emma Holloway. I'm 77. I live alone in the same house Ray and I bought decades ago. He's been gone for 20 years now, but sometimes it feels like he just stepped out to grab the mail. His favorite rocking chair still sits in the corner of the living room. I've never been able to sit in it since. And yet, I can't bring myself to move it either. My glasses were folded neatly by the book I hadn't finished in weeks. Next to them, my phone lit up with a quiet buzz. Thorne's name. My only child. A successful dentist. He lived 15 minutes away, but seemed much farther these days. He had given me this phone last Christmas. So we can stay connected, Mom, he said. But I knew it was mostly so they could check in without having to visit. His voice came through the phone sharp and efficient. Mom, I can't make it today to fix that faucet. Edwin's got a tournament. I promised I'd drive him. That's all right, I said quietly. I'll call a plumber. Why waste money? I'll get to it. Maybe Sunday. Maybe Sunday. If nothing else came up. Before hanging up, he added, Oh, and can you watch the house next week? Lavinia and I are flying to New York for a conference. Sure, I said. What about the kids? Edwin's coming with us. Audrey's at school. That was it. Another task. Another goodbye without a goodbye. Thorne wasn't a bad son. He remembered holidays. He called every week. But there was no warmth, just obligation. Like he was checking off a box labeled, Call Mom. Lavinia, his wife, had stopped trying years ago. Back then, she used to visit, bringing little Audrey with her. But when she realized there wouldn't be a large inheritance waiting, her warmth cooled. They didn't know the truth, no one did. Ray had left behind a patent. A brilliant design that sold for $7 million. The money came after his death, and I kept it quiet. Even from Thorne. I wanted him to earn his life, not be handed it. And he did. They did. Lavish home, private schools, vacations. They didn't need my money or me. Still, I saved that fortune for them. I invested every penny. I imagined one day surprising them with it. A moment of joy. Gratitude. But as time passed, I began to wonder if that moment would ever come. Or if it even mattered. I called a plumber. A young man named Brent showed up within an hour. He was polite, fast, and told me stories about his grandmother. How she still drove at 80 and bowled every Sunday. We laughed. It felt good to talk without being timed. After he left, I stepped out into the drizzle. Scarf, umbrella, cane, the one Thorne gave me for my 75th. An antique. Not the most subtle gift, but I pretended to love it. I always do. The neighborhood had changed. New faces, taller kids, fresh paint on fences. I moved slowly, not from weakness but caution. I still like doing things myself, shopping, walking, living at the store. I ran into Wendy, an old friend from the library where I once worked. Emma, she exclaimed. It's been too long. We talked. She smiled proudly when she mentioned Thorne's growing business. You must be so proud, she said. I am, I replied. But pride and happiness are not the same. He was successful. Lavinia too. But was I a part of that life, or just a leftover from another one? I came home with groceries and wet shoes. I made tea and stared at Ray's chair. Would he understand the silence between our son and me? Would he say I waited too long to share the gift he left us? Or would he just sit in that chair, smile, and remind me? Emma, we raised him to stand tall. Maybe that's enough. Maybe. But it still felt lonely. Last year, I volunteer at a children's hospice now. I read books to kids who she didn't finish the sentence, but you understood. That's wonderful, Wendy. You always had a knack for finding the right books for our very own. We talked some more. Wendy invited me to a meeting of former library staff next month, and I promised to think about it. Back home, I put away the groceries and sat by the window with a cup of tea. The rain had intensified, and I was glad I'd made it back before the real downpour. My thoughts returned to my conversation with Wendy. Maybe I should have done some volunteering too, or find some hobby other than reading and watching old movies. I had the time, my health allowed, and importantly, I had the funds. The same 7 million that lay in accounts and investment portfolios managed by my financial advisor, Alistair Prime. Alistair was the only person besides me who knew about Ray's money. He worked for a small but reputable investment firm and had been handling my finances for almost 20 years. Thanks to his advice, the sum had not only not decreased, but had grown considerably despite periodic economic crisis. At the beginning of each month, Alistair sent me a report on the status of my accounts and investments. I read these reports carefully, although I did not always understand all the terms. Ray taught me the basics of financial literacy, and I tried to keep track of me money, even if Alistair did most of the work. I never spent that money on myself. Lived on my pension and what little savings Ray and I had before his invention. My house was modest but comfortable. My car practical but not new. I didn't allow myself luxuries, believing that this money was the future of Thorn and his children. But what if I was wrong? What if by protecting Thorn from unearned wealth, I had deprived him of the opportunity to learn that his father was not just a middle-class engineer, but a true inventor whose work was valued in the millions? What if, by hiding the money from him, I had unwittingly contributed to his estrangement from me? Or more likely, if Thorn had found out about money sooner, wouldn't he have become even more indifferent, believing that I was already well off and didn't need his attention? The phone vibrated again. This time it was Lavinia. "Emma, it's Lavinia. Thorn said you agreed to look after the house next week." Yeah, of course. You ache. I made a list of things to do. Water the plants, check the mail, turn the lights on and off at night. I'll send it to you in a text. Okay, Lavinia. Also, we're keeping Mickey. She's our new cat. We got her from the shelter last month. I was surprised. Lavinia knew I was allergic to cats. But Lavinia, I'm allergic to you're not going to live in your house, Emma. She interrupted me. Just come by twice a day to feed her and clean her litter box. It'll take 5 minutes. I'm sure you'll be fine. I didn't argue. Sure, I could have said that even 5 minutes in the presence of a cat was enough to give me an allergy attack, but I knew Lavinia would brush off my objections or worse, accuse me of being dramatic. All right, Lavinia. I'll deal with the cat. Thank you, Emma. You're a real help. She disconnected without even asking how I was doing. I put the phone away and looked out the window at their rain. All these years I'd been saving Ray's money for Thorn and his family. But did they deserve it? Did they deserve $7 million people who couldn't take 5 minutes to genuinely inquire about my life? For the first time in 20 years, I allowed myself to wonder, what if I spent that money on myself? Buy a house somewhere. On the islands, hire servants, travel, maybe even buy yacht. What if instead of waiting to die in a quiet house in Canapapolis, I started living for real? The thought was so unfamiliar, so liberating that I was almost afraid of it. But it had already settled in my mind, and I knew I would return to it again and again. December came to Canapapolis with a cold wind and the first snow. I've never been a fan of winter, but in recent years its arrival has brought a special mentally. Ray loved Christmas, hanging garlands all over the house, setting up glowing reindeer on the lawn, baking ginger cookies. After he died, I continued to honor some of that traditions, but each year I did less and less. I pulled a small artificial Christmas tree out of the pantry. The someone Ray and I had bought at our last Christmas sale together. It was modest, no more than a meter tall. But it was enough for me. Setting it on the dresser in the living room, I added a few glass balls and a silver garland. That was all the decorations. Sitting down in my chair, I looked at Ray's picture on the wall. He was smiling. Standing at his desk in the garage, he turned into a workshop. It was there that his latest invention Waspin, an improved chip for medical devices that later earned me $7 million. Ray worked on this project for the last 2 years of his life. He would spend hours in the workshop, some atoms forgetting to eat. I brought him sandwiches and coffee, which he devoured without taking his eyes off their schematics and formulas. He would explain his work to me, and though I didn't understand the technical details, I could see his eyes light up when he talked about the potential applications of his invention. "Imagine, Emma," he said, "this chip will be able to process data 10 times faster than its existing counterparts. That means medical equipment will be able to detect problems at much earlier stages. Just think how many lives that could save." I believed him. I always believed in his genius. Even when others doubted, Ray wasn't just an engineer. He was a visionary. He just lacked the ambition and business acumen to turn his ideas into a commercial success. Until that last invention, he managed to patent his design a month before doctors discovered it had an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer. Ironically, the man who created the technology for early detection of disease himself went to the doctors too late. By the time it was discovered, the cancer was already at stage 4. Ray died 3 months after the diagnosis. He didn't have time to see his invention change the world of medical diagnostics. No time to be recognized by the professional community. No time to enjoy the financial rewards of years of labor. Thorne was 34 years old at the time. He had just opened his dental practice, taking out a mortgage and equipment loan. He and Lavinia had been married for 2 years, and little Audrey was only a year old. They lived modestly in a small house on the outskirts of Carnopapolis, and Lavinia only dreamed of owning her own business. After Ray's death, it took several months before representatives from a large technology company contacted me. They were interested in Ray's patent and offered to buy it back for a substantial sum. I didn't know what to do. So, I sought the advice of Alistair Prime, a financial advisor who had been recommended to maybe a colleague of Ray. Alistair helped me negotiate and eventually get the best deal possible. $7 million plus a small percentage of future sales of Ray's chip equipment. The money was deposited into my account in a single payment, and I was suddenly richer than I had ever imagined. At that moment, it seemed natural to share the news with Thorne. To tell him about his father's genius, that Ray wasn't just fixing equipment at the company where he worked, but creating new technology, to show him that hard work could yield impressive results, even if not right away. But something stopped me. Perhaps it was a conversation with Alistair, who warned me against making hasty decisions. $7 million is a considerable sum, Mrs. Holloway, he said. Then, but it can disappear very quickly if not managed wisely. Let's have a financial plan first. Or maybe it was a conversation I overheard with Thorne when he was visiting me shortly after my father's death. He was on the phone with Lenia. "Yeah, I'm fine." "No, Mom's doing great. Don't worry, I won't be long." "Yes, I'll ask about the house. Mom can't keep it alone." "That's obvious. Maybe we can convince her to sell it and move to a smaller apartment." "No, I'm not asking her to live with us. We don't have enough space. Where else would we put my mother?" That conversation hurt me deeply. Thorne thought I was a burden before I could even be a burden. I was only 57 years old, in great shape, working at the library and didn't need any help. But he was already planning how to get rid of a potential problem. At that moment, I decided I wouldn't tell him about the money. At least not right away. I wanted to see how he would cope on his own, without a financial cushion from his parents. I wanted him to learn to appreciate what he earned through his own labor like Ray had taught him. And he did. In 20 years, Thorn went from an aspiring dentist to the owner of a respectable clinic. Lavinia opened her first beauty parlor, then a second, then a third. They moved into a spacious house in an upscale neighborhood, sent their children to private schools, went to expensive resorts. I watched their successes from the sidelines, proud of their accomplishments, and at the same time becoming a more and more insignificant part of their lives. The better their business went, the less they needed me. Calls became less frequent, visits shorter, conversations more superficial. There were times when I almost dared to tell Thorn about the money, like when Audrey was applying to college and they were worried about tuition, or when Lavinia had trouble renting space for her third salon and had to take out a loan. But each time I stopped, partly out of fear that they would see Missalance all these years as a betrayal, partly because by then they were used to solving their problems on their own and probably wouldn't even accept my help, but mostly because I didn't want to be valued for money alone. All these years later, I had planned to leave them money as an inheritance. I'd made a will that divided the bulk of it between Thorn, Audrey, and Edwin, with a small portion going to charity the young. Inventors Fund I'd set up and raise memory. But lately, I've been wondering more and more if they deserved the inheritance. Especially after the Thanksgiving incident when Lavinia forgot to invite me to the family dinner. I found out about it by accident from a neighbor who saw them all together at a restaurant. When I asked Thorn why I hadn't been invited, he mumbled something about thinking I didn't like restaurants and they didn't want to bother me. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night, pondering the fact that my only son didn't see fit to include me in family celebrations. That his wife, who has called me Mom for 23 years, sees something strange about forgetting about her mother-in-law. That my grandchildren, whom I once babysat, barely say hello when I see them staring at their phones. And then the thought crossed my mind. What if I spent that money on myself? What if, instead of leaving an inheritance to people who were already well off and didn't seem to appreciate me much, I let myself enjoy my last years? The next day, I called Alistair and asked him to come over for a consultation. He was surprised. We usually met once a quarter at his office, and the next meeting was still 2 weeks away. Is something wrong, Mrs. Holloway? He asked worriedly. No, Alistair, nothing urgent. It's just that I need your advice on some change of plans. He arrived 2 days later, elegant as ever, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a strict suit. Alistair was in his mid-50s, and in the 20 years we'd been working together, he hadn't changed much except for a few grey hairs on his temples. You look beautiful, Mrs. Holloway, he said as we entered the house. You always do. Come on, Alistair. I smiled as I led him into the living room. At my age, that's not a compliment. It's a polite lie. No, it's not. You're perfectly preserved for 77. Many of my clients half your age look much worse. We sat down at the dining table, which I had set with a tea set and homemade cookies. Alistair took a file folder out of his briefcase. So, Mrs. Holloway, were there any changes you wanted to discuss? Problems with the current investment portfolio? No, Alistair. There's nothing wrong with the portfolio. You're managing the finances very well as always. I wanted to talk about paused trying to find the right words about some changes in my plans for the future. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting for me to continue. You see, all these years I've been saving money for Thorn and his family. Planned to leave them a nice inheritance. But lately, I've been thinking maybe I should spend some of it on myself while I can still enjoy life. Alistair looked at me carefully. That's a perfectly reasonable thought, Mrs. Holloway. If I may make a personal remark, I have long wondered why you live so frugal with such means. Of course, prudence in finances is commendable, but sometimes one can afford certain pleasures. I was thinking of a house somewhere warm, maybe the Caribbean or Florida. That's a wonderful idea. With your money, you can afford a nice property in any of those places. Have you looked at anything in particular yet? Not really. I was also thinking about a yacht and traveling, and perhaps hiring staff. I'm not getting any younger and some help around the house would be useful. Alistair nodded, making notes in his notebook. It's all quite feasible with your capital, Mrs. Holloway. A nice house in an upscale neighborhood in Florida or the Caribbean will cost from $500,000 to $2 million depending on the size and location. A yacht is from $500,000 to several million. Again, depending on size and equipment. Staff, that's about $150,000 a year. Travel, let's budget another $100,000 a year. It's all well within your means. I listened to him and my fantasies began to take shape. It really was possible. I could really afford such a life. What about an inheritance for Thorne and the grandchildren? Huh? I asked. I still want to leave them something. Even if you spend $2 or $3 million on a house, a yacht, and other large purchases, you still have a substantial amount left for an inheritance. Plus, don't forget about investment income. Your portfolio generates about $400,000 a year, which is more than enough to cover your current expenses and reinvest. We agreed that I would start with a trip to the Caribbean after Christmas. Alistair recommended me a good travel agent and promised to prepare several investment portfolio options focused on my new goals. The next day, I called the travel agent and made an appointment. The thought of my upcoming trip filled me with energy. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future, instead of looking back nostalgically at the past. In mid-December, Thorne called to discuss Christmas plans. Mum, we're thinking of getting together at our house on the 25th, 5 o'clock at night. Is that okay with you? Yeah, sure. Thorne, what can I bring? You don't need anything, Mum. Lavinia will make the arrangements. Just come over. I could bake your favorite pecan pie. Don't bother, Mom. Lavinia's already ordered dessert from the pastry shop. I swallowed my resentment. My pecan pie was always the centerpiece of family gatherings. Ray said it was worth living to see Christmas. Thorne loved that pecan puan. He was a kid, but apparently now he preferred store-bought desserts to my homemade baked goods. A few days later, Lavinia called with a request to babysit their new cat, Mickey, during their trip to a New Year's Eve corporate event. Despite my cat allergy, which she was well aware of, Lavinia insisted, "You won't be living in our house, Emma." She said, "Just stop by twice a day to feed her and clean her litter box. It'll take 5 minutes. I'm sure you can do it." I didn't argue, even though I knew that even 5 minutes in the presence of a cat was enough to give me an allergy attack. Lavinia passed out without even asking how I was doing. A week before Christmas, I decided to take another step toward my new life. I called a realtor specializing in Florida and Caribbean real estate and asked him to send me houses for sale. The very next day, I received an email with dozens of photos of luxury oceanfront villas. One of them located on St. Bart's particularly caught my eye. A white house with blue shutters surrounded by palm trees with its own access to their beach. I called the realtor and told her I would like to view this house during my trip in January. She was thrilled and promised to make arrangements. That same evening, Thorne called. He sounded annoyed. "Mum, could you come over tomorrow? Our dishwasher is broken and Lavinia is hosting a pre-Christ dinner for her staff. We need you to help with the dishes. Sure, Thorn. What time should I get there? 6 o'clock would perfect. And Mum, where's something, decent? There'll be some important people there for Lavinia. I could feel the irritation building inside me. Thorn hadn't called me in 2 weeks, and now he was calling me just because they needed a freer pair, and he has the nerve to tell me how to dress. I'll try not to embarrass you by looking like that, Thorn. I said colder than I intended. Mum, that's not what I meant. I'll be there at 6 in decent clothes. I hung up the phone, feeling my hand shaking. For the first time in years, I let myself show irritation when talking to my son. Usually, I held back for fear of offending him or seeming ungrateful for the crumbs of attention I received. But now, with plans for a new life already forming in my head, I felt freer. The next day, I actually arrived at their house at 6 o'clock in the evening, dressed in my best dress and jacket. Lavinia met me on the doorstep already in evening attire with perfect hair and makeup. Emma, thank God you're here. The guests will be here any minute. Dishes are in the kitchen. Aprons in the kitchen. When it's done, just put the plates in the cupboard. Thorn will fix the dishwasher this weekend. She turned and walked off into the living room without even thanking me. I walked into the kitchen and found a mountain of unwashed dishes. Obviously, they'd been piling them up for days, waiting for the dishwasher to be repaired. I put on an apron and got to work. I spent the entire evening in the kitchen washing dishes and occasionally helping to serve dishes. None of the guests paid any attention to me. To them, I was just an attendant. Lavinia didn't introduce me to any of her co-workers or employees. Thorn, walking past the kitchen, tossed, "Everything okay, Mom?" And without waiting for an answer, went back to the guests. By the time the last guest left, it was almost midnight. I washed the last plate, took off my apron, and went out into the living room. Lavinia was sitting on the couch sipping wine. Thorn was putting away empty glasses. "So how did it go?" I asked. "Great," Lavinia answered without looking at me. "Thanks for your help, Emma." "Yeah. Thanks, Mom," Thorn echoed. "You really helped." "You's out." "I ordered a cab," I said. "It should be here any minute." "A cab?" Thorn finally looked at me. "I could drive you." "No need. I can see you're tired, and I don't want to wait for you to finish up here." I said goodbye and went outside to wait for a cab. I didn't want to stay another minute in their house where I didn't feel like a mother and grandmother, but like a servant, called in when needed and released when not needed. In the cab, I reflected on how our relationship with Thorn had changed. Over the years, when he was a child, we were so close. I read him stories, taught him how to ride his bike, helped him with his homework. He trusted me with his secrets, shared his dreams. When he started dating Lavinia, I was happy for him. She seemed like a smart and ambitious girl who could make him happy. And maybe she was. Maybe they really were happy together. There just wasn't room for me in their happiness. When I got home, I sat down at my computer and opened Female from the Realtor. I looked at the pictures of the house on St. Bart's one more time and texted her that I wanted to set up an appointment as soon as possible. "I'll be coming to the island on January 3rd, I wrote, and would like to tour the house the same day. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually looking forward to something. Christmas at Thorn and Lavinia's house was no longer a holiday I looked forward to. Now it was just an obligatory event to be experienced. But going to the Caribbean, seeing the dream house, planning a new life, it was all filling me with an energy and excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. Ree would be pleased, I thought as I looked at his picture. He always wanted me to live life to the fullest. Christmas morning was unexpectedly sunny for December in Canopapolis. Rays of light were streaming through the blinds into my bedroom when I opened my eyes. For a moment, I thought I heard Ray's voice calling me into the kitchen where he'd already prepared a holiday breakfast. But it was just a trick of the ear. Ray had passed away 20 years ago, and since then, Christmas mornings had become the loneliest hours of the year for me. I slowly got out of bed and walked to the window. The neighbors' houses were decorated with garlands and Christmas figures. Children were already running around outside, showing off their new gifts to each other. Life went on, with or without Ray. After eating breakfast and drinking a cup of coffee, I got busy preparing for my evening visit with Thorn and Lavinia. Lavinia insisted I didn't need to bring anything. I couldn't come empty-handed. I pulled out the gifts I had prepared. For Thor, antique cufflinks that had once belonged to his grandfather. For Lavinia, a silk scarf bought at an expensive boutique in Charlotte. For Audrey, a silver bracelet engraved with her initials. For Edwin, a collector's edition of a science fiction novel I hoped would interest him. Then I took care of myself. I chose a long-sleeved dark blue dressy. Enough for the holiday, but not too flashy. I styled my hair and applied light makeup. The mirror reflected a woman who looked much younger than her 77 years. Good genes and self-care had done their job. I had almost no deep wrinkles. My back was straight and my gait was confident. As I was finishing my preparations, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar with an international code. "Hello," I answered with some apprehension. "Mrs. Holley?" It was a woman's voice with a slight accent. "This is Isabel Dupree, the realtor from St. Bart's. I'm sorry to disturb you on a holiday, but I have great news. The owners of the villa you were interested in are willing to reduce its price by $200,000 if you make a decision within a week of the inspection." I was surprised to get a call on Christmas Day, but it was good news indeed. "Thank you, Miss Dupree. This is a very interesting offer. I'll be on Island on January 3rd, as we agreed." "That's fine, Mrs. Holloway. I'll have all the documents ready for inspection. If you decide to purchase the villa, we can sign the preliminary contract the very next day. The owners are very motivated to sell, and with your budget of $2.5 million, we could even discuss including some furniture and equipment in the deal." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, feeling the excitement growing inside at the thought of my own villa by the sea. "I look forward to seeing you again." "Me too, Mrs. Holloway. Merry Christmas to you." "Merry Christmas, Mr. Dupree." He hung up without noticing Thorn standing in the kitchen doorway. He'd come to pick me up for a family dinner, and had obviously walked. And while I was on the phone, his face was a mixture of surprise and confusion. "Mum," he said slowly, "what was that? Who were you talking to about $2.5 million? I felt the blood rush from my face. 20 years of secrecy was about to come out, and I wasn't ready for it. "Thorn, I didn't hear you come in." "The door was unlocked," he answered, still staring at me. "So, what was it? Some kind of prank? Phone scammers?" I took a deep breath. The moment of truth had arrived. Thorn, not the way I'd planned it. "No, Thorn. It wasn't a joke, and it wasn't scammers. It was a realtor from the Caribbean. Yeah, considering buying a villa on St. Bart's." His eyebrows rose so high they almost disappeared beneath his hairline. "A villa on St. Bart's for $2.5 million. Mom, are you okay? Maybe you should see a doctor." "There's nothing wrong with me, Thorn," I replied, feeling my irritation mingle with my shame. "I'm not out of my mind, if that's what you mean." "Then please explain to me how you're going to buy a villa for $2.5 million when you've lived on a librarian's pension all your life." I sighed and pointed to a chair. "I think we'd better sit down. It's a long story, and I'm sorry you're learning about it this way." Thorn sat down, keeping a weary eye on me. I gathered my thoughts and began the story of Ree's latest invention, the patent, the deal with the technology company, and the $7 million that had been sitting in my accounts and investment portfolios all these years. As I spoke, the expression on Thorne's face changed from disbelief to amazement, then to shock, and finalito something I couldn't quite pinpoint, perhaps a mixture of resentment and anger. "Are you telling me," he said when I was done, "that all these years you've had $7 million and you never told me anything? Not even when I took out a mortgage and a loan for equipment for the clinic? Even when Lavinia and I were working 16 hours a day to provide for our family? Even when Audrey needed to pay for college? Thorne, I wanted you to make it on your own. On your own like your father taught you. And you did it. Look at you. A successful dentist with your own practice, a beautiful home, a happy family. You've achieved all that without me financial help, and I'm proud of you. We have to go," he said finally, glancing at his watch. "Lavinia is waiting. We'll continue this conversation later with the family." The drive to Thorne's house passed in tense silence. When we arrived, Lavinia met us at the door, dressed in an elegant red dress with perfect hair and makeup. "Merry Christmas, Emma." She hugged me, formal as always, barely touching me. "Come in. Everyone's already here." Everyone meant Audrey, who was home from college for the vacations, and Edwin, who was engrossed in his phone as usual. They both said hello to me languidly, accepting gifts with polite but insincere smiles. I noticed Thorne take Lavinia aside and say something quietly to her. Her eyes widened, and she cast me a look of incredulity and strange, greedy interest. They whispered for a few more minutes, and then Lavinia came up to me with a whole new expression on her face, a wide smile and shining eyes. "Emma, darling, let me take your coat," she murmured. "You look gorgeous today. Is that a new dress? That shade of blue suits you so well." I let her take the coat, realizing that Lavinia's new attitude was a direct consequence of my unexpected wealth. She had never before been interested in my clothes or complimented my looks. "Thank you, Lavinia. You look beautiful too. Let's go to the living room." She took me under her arm, something she had never done before. "I made your favorite punch. Or perhaps you'd prefer champagne. We have some excellent champagne. French. Punch would be perfect." "Thank you." In Thepalore, Lavinia sat me in the most comfortable chair and almost forcibly handed me a glass of punch. Thorne sat across from me, still immersed in his own thoughts. Audrey and Edwin didn't seem to notice the change, and Atmospherian continued to work on their phones. "Children," Lavinia said loudly, "put your phones away and talk to your grandmother. She came all this way to be with us today." I almost choked on my punch. Such a journey was only a 15-minute drive, and Lavinia had never insisted that the kids socialize with me before. Dinner passed in the same strange atmosphere. Lavinia kept putting me down the best bites, interested in my opinion on every subject, laughing at my every joke. Thorne was more reserved, but I noticed him watching me as if trying to solve a riddle. The children, having received invisible signals from their parents, were unusually polite and attentive. After dessert, when we were all settled in the living room with coffee, Thorne cleared his throat and looked at their children. "Your grandmother has some amazing news," he said. "It turns out that Grandpa Ray wasn't just an engineer, but a real inventor. Before he died, he patented a technology that was sold for how much, Mom?" $7 million. I answered quietly. Audrey and Edwin's eyes widened, almost comically. "7 million?" Audrey exclaimed. "Grandma, are you serious?" "Absolutely," I nodded. "Your grandfather was a genius. He created a technology that greatly improved medical diagnosis. The company that bought Thepatent paid $7 million plus a percentage of equipment sales. And all that money, you have it? Edwin asked, showing genuine interest in the conversation for the first time all evening. Yes, Edwin. I've been saving it all these years, investing it through a financial advisor. Now it's even more than the original $7 million. But why didn't you ever tell us? Audrey asked with a ting of resentment in her voice. I wanted your father to achieve everything on his own without a financial cushion from his parents. And he did. I'm proud of what he's accomplished on his own. But now that we know about the money, Lavinia intervened. We can think about how best to use it for the whole family. I looked at her. This is it. I've been waiting for this moment ever since Thorn discovered my secret. Actually, Lavinia, I already have plans for that money. What plans? She asked, still smiling, but with tension in her voice. I'm going to buy a house on St. Bart's, maybe a yacht, travel, hire staff to live comfortably. The smile slowly slid off Lavinia's face. But, that's a lot of money, Emma. You can't spend all that money on your own. What about your family? What about Thorn? Your Unnison? What about your grandchildren? Thorn is perfectly well off, I said calmly. He has a successful practice, a house, cars. Audrey is in a prestigious college. Edwin will soon follow. You don't need my money. This isn't about need, Emma. Lavinia was beginning to lose patience. It's about justice. That money is Ray's inheritance. It should stay in the family, pass on to the next generation. It is in the family, Lavinia. I have it. And I'm family too, aren't I? Lavinia straightened in her chair, her face hard. Emma, be reasonable. You're 77 years old. How much longer will you live? 5 years, 10. Why do you need a house in the islands and a yacht? That money should belong to the whole family. Give it back. There was silence in the room. Even Thorn seemed shocked by his wife's bluntness. Lavinia, he shouted at her. What? Shut into him. I'm telling the truth. Your mother has been hiding millions from us all these years, and now she wants to spend it on some fantasy, instead of taking care of the family's future. It's selfish and unfair. I looked at her, feeling strangely calm. The masks are finally dropped. No more fake smiles, no more fake compliments, just pure unadulterated greed. I'm not going to give you that money, Lavinia, I said quietly but firmly. Not now, not after I'm dead. What do you mean? Her voice became shrill. I'm changing my will. Instead of leaving everything to you, I'm spending the money on myself. A house on the islands, a yacht, traveling, personal servants, everything Ray and I dreamed of but could never afford. And the rest of the money will go to charity. The Young Inventors Fund I've set up in Ray's memory. Lavinia went pale as if I'd physically hit her. You can't doff it, she whispered. It's raised money, and it has to stay in the family. It will stay in the family, Lavinia. My family, which as it turns out, you're not part of. Real family isn't people who only remember you when they need something. Not the ones who forget to invite you to Thanksgiving. Not the ones who ask you to cat-sit knowing you're allergic. And certainly not the ones who only take an interest in your life after hearing about your millions. Thorn looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Perhaps it was realization. Perhaps shame. Mom, he started. But I held up my hand, stopping him. There's no need, Thorn. I'm not blaming you or your family. You live your own lives. You have your own priorities. I understand that. But you have to understand that I have a right to live my life and use my money as I see fit. That we're a family, he said almost pleadingly. Family is more than just blood ties, Thorn. A family is people who care about each other, who take an interest in each other's lives, who help each other not because they hope to get something in return, but because they love each other. We were a family once, but that was a long time ago. The day after Christmas greeted me with silence. I woke up late, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. The events of last night were still running through my mind. The shocked look on Thorne's face, Lavinia's pale fury, the puzzled looks on my grandchildren's faces. My secret that I'd kept for 20 years had been revealed in the most unexpected way. And now I had to live with the consequences. I brewed coffee and sat by the window watching a neighbor boy ride his new bike down the snowy street. The simple joy of childhood. Thorne had been like that once too. An enthusiastic child, excited about a new toy. When did it change? When did he turn into a man for whom money became more important than relationships? Or had he always been like that, and I just didn't want to see it? The phone rang, interrupting my missings. It was Alistair. Good morning, Mrs. Holloway. I hope I didn't wake you. No, Alistair. I've been up a long time. Is something the matter? I just wanted to let you know that I've prepared the papers to change your will as we discussed. You'll be able to sign them after the holidays. I've spoken to the travel agent who's arranged your visit to St. Bart's. I've sent all the details to your email. Thank you, Alistair. You're very prompt. I'll wish happy to help. By the way, he paused. Miss Dupree, the realtor from St. Bart's, said she contacted you yesterday, Dot. I hope the news was good. Yes, very. The owners are willing to lower the price if I make a quick decision. That's great. I'll prepare the necessary transfer of funds if you decide to purchase the villa. I'll just need your final approval. We talked for a few more minutes about the details of the trip, and I could feel my excitement growing. This was really happening. I was really going to change my life, move to an island, live in a luxury villa by Thesia. At the age of 77, I had finally decided to embark on an adventure.